Ever feel like, after the whole like honeymoon phase of a relationship, that initial spark, you know what I mean? It kind of fades a
Oh,
little.
absolutely. It's like you trade in those first date butterflies for I guess, the comfort of sweatpants and knowing what they'll order for takeout, right?
Exactly. Like you're totally in sync, but maybe missing a little bit of that initial dot spark.
Right. And that's totally normal, by the way. But it's what we do when that happens that makes all the difference.
And that is exactly what we are diving into today on this deep dive as we explore Chapter 10 of Gary Chapman's The Five Love Languages.
Yeah, good old Gary Chapman. He's got some really insightful stuff about how love, real love, it's a choice, not just a feeling.
It's so true. It's easy to think that once those initial sparks settle, that's it.
Yeah, like we expect that in love feeling to just last forever.
It reminds me of, have you ever read about baby birds and how they imprint on the first thing they see? Total instinct.
Oh, yeah. And Chapman actually uses a similar analogy in the book. He talks about Canada geese. You know how loud and intense their mating calls are, but they don't last forever.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So that initial attraction is kind of like those mating calls, powerful but temporary.
Exactly. And that's why he makes a clear distinction between being in love, which is driven by, well, hormones and excitement, and then there's loving, which is a conscious choice we make day after day.
And that choice to love is put to the test in this really compelling story Chapman shares about a couple, Brent and Becky.
Oh, yeah, Brent and Becky's story. They were on the verge of divorce after being married for 12 years.
Yeah, they'd built a really great life together, successful careers, living that American dream, but behind closed doors, things weren't so picture perfect.
Not even close. Becky feels totally blindsided when Brent tells her he wants a divorce. She thought they were working towards the same goals, putting in the effort, but it turns out their love tanks, as Chapman calls them, were running on empty.
Which is heartbreaking, because in Becky's mind, they were doing everything right,
Becker.
following that societal script for a successful couple.
Right. But then Brent shares his perspective, and it's like, whoa, totally different story. He admits that he hasn't actually felt in love with Becky for years, that their relationship felt empty.
Even though from the outside looking in, they seemed fine.
Exactly. And this is where that whole statistic about 60% of second marriages ending in divorce comes into play. Like, you'd think second time around, they'd have it figured out, right?
Right. Learn from their mistakes.
Exactly. But a lot of times, people going into a second marriage, they might be more vulnerable to falling into that trap of thinking that initial in-love feeling equals true, lasting love. So they're chasing that same high, instead of realizing the amount of effort it actually takes to choose to love when things get rough.
And that's exactly what Brent does, right? He leaves Becky convinced that this new relationship, this new person, will be the solution to everything.
Exactly. He's convinced he's found the one, and this time it'll be different. But surprise, surprise, the honeymoon phase fades in his new relationship too.
So this second heartbreak, this second time that honeymoon feeling faded, that was kind of a wake-up call for Brent.
Oh, absolutely. Talk about a turning point.
Yeah.
He finally realized that finding a new partner wasn't going to magically erase all his baggage, And that's where he discovered Chapman's book, this idea that you have to choose love, that it's not just something you, fall into and hope for the best.
So he was ready to actually, maybe put in some work this time.
Exactly. And that's when understanding those love languages, remember we've talked about them before, that becomes super important.
Right. The words of affirmation, acts of service.
Right. Receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. Right. So through counseling, both Brent and Becky, they rediscover their own love languages and, more importantly, how to actually speak their partner's language, which is huge.
Which makes total sense.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get stuck in that mindset of expressing love in the way we want to receive it without really thinking about what our partner actually needs.
100%. And Chapman, he's really big on this point. It's not about waiting around for those warm, fuzzy feelings to magically reappear. It's about taking action, even when it feels, maybe a little awkward or forced at first.
It's like, how everyone says exercise is good for you?
Yeah.
But some days you just don't feel like hitting the gym, But you do it anyway because it's good for you in the long run.
It's a fantastic analogy because it's the same with love, right? You have to show up consistently, even when it's not the easiest or most convenient, or even when you're not, feeling super lovey-dovey.
Okay. Confession time. My partner's love language is totally acts of service. And let's just say that vacuuming, not exactly my go-to romantic gesture.
Okay, sure.
But Chapman actually talks about this. Sometimes Speaking your partner's language means stepping outside that comfort zone, doing things you wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards. I gotta say, he's right. It might feel weird at first, but when you see how much your partner appreciates it, it's so worth it.
Totally. Because when we make that effort to choose love in a way that might not come naturally to us, that speaks volumes. It says, hey, I'm willing to go the extra mile here because you matter that much to me.
It's about those small, everyday things, not just the grand gestures.
Absolutely. It's like you're learning a new language, right? It takes effort, practice, some stumbles along the way, but the reward is being able to connect on a deeper level. Speaking of learning new languages, have you figured out what your love language is yet? And what about your partner's?
Yeah, that's a good reminder. It can be such an eye-opening experience for couples.
Absolutely. And it's not about those big, splashy gestures. It's about those small, consistent things that we do day in and day out.
So, back to Brent and Becky. Through this whole process of learning their love languages and, more importantly, choosing to love each other in the right way, did they find their way back to each other?
They did. But it's important to remember it wasn't some overnight miracle. Chapman, he's very upfront about this. Building a lasting relationship, it takes time, it takes effort. But because they were both fully committed to learning this new way of loving and choosing it every single day, not just when it was easy, that's how they were able to rebuild that foundation, and it's stronger than ever.
It's amazing how, shifting your perspective on love, seeing it as this active choice, can really make such a difference in a relationship.
It's huge. And, it's something that resonates with so many couples, this idea that love isn't just a feeling, it's something you do, it's a verb.
Totally. And it's about, like we've been talking about, showing up for your partner, even when it's tough, even when, honestly, you'd rather just, stay in your sweatpants and watch TV.
Exactly. And sometimes those acts of love, they aren't always, the most romantic seeming things, right?
Right. But like we said, even something like vacuuming, if that's your partner's love language, it speaks volumes.
Absolutely. Those small gestures, a word of encouragement, a helping hand, those are the things that really add up over time.
It all comes back to speaking each other's language. So as we wrap up our deep dive today on Chapter 10 of the 5 Love Languages, here's something to think about. What's one thing, big or small, that you can do today to speak your partner's love language, even if you're not really feeling it? Maybe it's a genuine compliment. Maybe it's offering to help with a chore, or even just putting your phone down and giving them your full attention.
Because honestly, those small acts of love, those are the things that build a strong, lasting relationship. Remember, love is a choice, and it's a choice we get to make every single day.